Okay, welcome everyone. So the topic for the Innovation Spotlight session for the day, the one happening right now, is being creative is easier than being innovative. 10 golden rules to unbundle creative potential. For this topic, we have with us Professor Ramnath Narayan Swamy, who is a distinguished professor of social sciences and international relations committee chair at Flame University, India. Professor Narayan Swamy received his doctorate degree in economics from Paris, France, and has completed MA and BA in political science from University of Pune. He also holds DEA in sociology from University in Paris, France, and DHESS in economics from Paris, France. Professor Narayan Swamy has over 30 years of work experience and was associated with IMB, Gokhale Institute of Political and Economics, Pune, and and School of Advanced Studies in Social Sciences, Paris. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. Welcome and over to you.
Thank you very much. Since I don't have much time, I've been given um, a time range of about 20 to 25 minutes, and this is a large, wide, complex subject, so which I have to try to simplify as much as I can. Let me begin right away. The topic that I'm going to speak on today is unbundling creative intelligence or unbundling creative potential. And the idea here is as we progress from the young child to the young adult, and as we grow from adolescents to becoming full fledged adults, we seem to acquire willy nilly, sometimes consciously, sometimes deliberately, and sometimes not so consciously, six types of intelligence. The first, of course, is analytical intelligence, something that we start acquiring while we are still at school, which is related eventually in later life to the firm or the company or the institution that we eventually work for. The second, of course, is emotional intelligence, and that came into the fore around late 1997 with the publication by Daniel Goleman of his cardinal work on emotional intelligence. He was a professor at Harvard, continues to be there, which is related to our ability to articulate ourselves to ourselves. The third is spiritual intelligence, which is related to the context of the environment, which is about learning to experience the perfection of the inside. The old saying in English that looks are deceptive means that the outside of you does not necessarily correspond to what you are on the inside. So we need to conquer that inside by living through the inside, which is directly a function of spiritual intelligence. Then, of course, you have in recent years, past decade or so, a number of outpourings on social intelligence, cultural intelligence, which deal with social intelligence, for example, deals with the agents of socialization that we come across at various stages of our lives, starting from school, college, university, and so on. And of course, cultural intelligence, which is more broadly related to the milieu in which we live in, through which we absorb values and other important tools that help us articulate to define who we are. And of course, the most important is inner intelligence, which can also be defined in, I mean, all these are in some way related to creative intelligence. Inner intelligence really refers to our capacity to intuit. That means the capacity, it is the one capacity that helps us develop the facility of intuition or empathy. But then why creativity and how does it differ from innovation, which is the subject of this evening's talk? Let me begin by saying in the world that we inhabit today, the space for innocence and spontaneity has sadly drastically diminished. This is, of course, due to a variety of reasons, which I don't have the time to go in here, but partly due to the information revolution, partly due to the fact that we as individuals have actually access to enormous amounts of information at the press of a button, both desirable and undesirable, has certainly contributed to this state of affairs. The one way to expand and develop and reinvent this space for innocence and spontaneity is creativity. Creativity is the original natural resource. It is the one quality that makes us genuinely human. The question, of course, can be asked, what is creativity and how do we define it? Well, the simple answer is that creativity is about moving away from the standard way of doing things. It is about improvising. It is about devising new solutions to old problems, and in a sense, reimagining the universe that we live in. So it is essentially a mental process. Innovation, on the other hand, is about taking the creative process to its logical conclusion so that it results in the creation of a new good, a new service, or a new product. So one is a process, a mental process, if you will, and the other is a noun, is a thing, where you take that process, deploy that process to bringing about, um, putting it through systems and processes and bringing about something in the end, a kind of output which creates a new good, a new service, or a new product, which is again deployed in the service of humanity. So, briefly, one is a process, the other is a thing. It's important here, nevertheless, to remark in passing that creativity is not innovation. Creativity is an abstract process. It is something that is essentially abstract, quintessentially abstract, whereas innovation is very, very concrete. Creativity, as I said, is a mental process. Innovation is a good or a service or a product. Creativity, it's easy to be creative. It's very difficult to be innovative. We're all creative in a variety of ways, even in our daily lives. Um, we want to experiment with a cooking recipe. One of the things that we do when we get back home is to cook our favorite dishes. We go to consult a recipe, but then quickly the mind prompts us to improvise. Why not use two, three other spices or herbs which I haven't used earlier, and let's see the impact that it has on the taste. This kind of improvisation is also creativity, it's also part of the creative process. It is creative, but it's very difficult to innovate. Innovation is something else. It requires a lot of hard work, a lot of persistence, and a lot of focus. Creativity challenges ideas, especially existing ideas, whereas innovation provides solutions. Creativity needs discipline, it needs a lot of focus, a lot of hard work, a lot of persistence. Innovation requires effort. And creativity, finally, is about ideation. It's about your capacity to develop novel, often brilliant, often breathtaking ideas continuously at a pace which is consistent. Whereas innovation is about invention, it's about creating something new, something that works, something that cuts time, cuts space, and cuts distance, reduces cost, and helps mankind deal with the challenges that it faces on an everyday basis. So the two things are very different. One is a mental process, and as I said, all human beings, this facility has been given by the Almighty to every single person, man or woman. And the Almighty is not partial in the way He distributes His grace. So it is a facility that is intrinsic to every single human being. However, innovation is not, that is not the case with innovation. Innovation requires a little more than ideas. It's about translating that idea into reality, creating tools and techniques, appropriate tools and techniques to make that reality, to make that idea into a product. in what follows, I try to summarize what I call 10 golden rules that I have used in my own life to on how do you unbundle this creative potential that is present in every single human being. These are principles that have been born out of my own experience. So you're unlikely to find it in any book or any standard textbook on the creative process, and they have served me well over time. And like most human beings, like all of you, we all try to live our lives by certain principles, by certain values. And most of us, like most of us, we don't always succeed. There are times when we fail, and I'm no exception to that. The only excuse I have in sharing that with you is that I try very hard to be fidel to the principles that I'm going to share with you. The first of these is to learn to become a child without being childish. Um, there's a beautiful book written by a Norwegian philosopher called Sophie's World, and some of you may be familiar with that lovely little book. It's basically the history of Western philosophy written in the form of a novel. Here's this philosopher who has this child, his daughter of 15, 16 years, and he wants to give her a gift, and he writes this book as a gift to his daughter. It's a remarkable work, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, please do read it. So, in the second chapter or so, this little girl asks the philosopher, "Who are you, and what do you do?" And he replies, saying, "I'm a philosopher." And she says, "What do philosophers do?" And he replies, saying something very akin to. He tells the little girl, "You see, among all living species, philosophers have one quality that is in common with little children." And she says, "What is that?" He says, "The capacity to ceaselessly wonder at the universe that we live in, to receive the universe every single day with a sense of wonder, a sense of astonishment, a sense of puzzle, and a sense of challenge every single day." So, in other words, what he was saying was that philosophers and children receive life like a child receives the world. The child receives every day is a new day. Every day is a challenge. Every day is a puzzle. And the child has this ceaseless ability to wonder with astonishment at the universe as the universe expands and opens itself to it. So this childlike quality, which actually triggers the space for innocence in us, the space for spontaneity, um, to see that our actions are not excessively contrived, to respond spontaneously to situations, is a very divine quality. So the first rule of unbundling creative potential, I would say, is learning to become a child without being childish. An adult cannot become a child again, or he becomes foolish. But it is possible to retain this childlike quality from children and to receive every day without prejudice, without assumptions, without fixating ourselves to very strong assumptions about people, situations, ideas, convictions, philosophies, and to retain an open mind, which is constantly absorbing new ideas and new processes from the outside world. So the first is learning to become a child without being childish, to be childlike in the way we receive the world. The second is which is very closely related to the first, is to develop a childlike approach to learning, which is not impeded by either the ego or identity, which is sociological, or fears. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the three principal enemies of learning. The ego, which tells you, "I know it all, there is nothing I can learn from others." The fact is that it's never true. And actions that are prompted by the ego inevitably lead to very, very undesirable consequences. So it's very important for a creative person to appreciate and internalize the value of humility, to receive the universe with humility, with folded hands every day. Um, in India, we have a prayer which we address to the Divine Mother when we get up from our beds. Even when there is a beautiful Sanskrit sloka which says that, "Forgive me, Mother, for stepping on you early morning when I get up. Forgive me for this act of mine," which kind of captures both that innocence and that humility. So, to avoid the ego, then the identity, which is sociological, I'm a professor, or I'm a CEO, or I'm a general manager, or I'm an outstanding teacher, so I know it all. There's nothing that people can teach me. This is excessive attachment to identity, which again can be dangerous. Or fears. Why do I emphasize fears? Because human beings typically, what they do not understand, they fear. So remain cautious and take a studied distance from these three things, because they represent, in a very true sense, the three principal enemies of learning. Third is to combine roles, functions, and domains in their simultaneity. The capacity to collapse roles, the capacity to seamlessly move through multiple functions, the capacity to expand our minds, to make it as inclusive as possible, to develop intimate knowledge of multiple domains is part of the creative process. We should not be straitjacketed. We should avoid mechanical thinking or linear thinking, but have the capacity for disruptive thinking, the ability to take in contradictory phenomena, absorb it, internalize it, make sense of it, and come out with something coherent. The fourth is our capacity to institutionalize and accept being challenged, to institutionalize and accept doubt. Democracy, to me, is the institutionalization of doubt, because it's a system that treats doubt as a legitimate philosophical posture, which democracies, democratic societies, value above everything else. In a similar manner, we should therefore always accept challenges in life, because we can't say that I'm invincible, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not subject, if your ideas are not subject to being challenged. You must have the ability to accept being challenged and respond to that challenge positively. The next is defining your North Star by deriving energy from appreciative inquiry and deep questioning. Your North Star is your vision, your passion, what drives you, fire in the belly. Your North Star, you must have a North Star because it gives you direction. Life without direction becomes purposeless and therefore can be very dangerous. It should be avoided at all cost. The absolute essential, it is absolutely essential to have a vision, a personal vision in life, the ability to articulate our values, the ability to have a clear alignment and understanding of vision and values, and a very clear understanding of context. So, defining your North Star by deriving energy from two things. One is appreciative inquiry, on the one hand, which refers to the ability to view the world in multiple ways and accept being challenged, and deep questioning. Deep questioning refers to the fears that you don't want to have. Please note, ladies and gentlemen, it is between these two poles, on the one hand, appreciative inquiry, and the other, deep questioning, that self development actually takes place. So it's very vital. The other, viewing past successes as impediments to the future. Many of us have accomplishments in our lives. Many of us have enduring successes in our lives. But it's important to keep a distance from that. You know why? Because the context has changed. Today's context is not what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, not even 1 year ago. So every time you engage the world, you have to start the nouveau. And the reason why I ask you to keep a distance from past successes, because typically the mind works in such a fashion that we are unconsciously or consciously always determined determined by our past experiences. They have an impact on us. And to try to keep a zero slate, start afresh each time. The other is, of course, very important, breaking the image we have of ourselves, because it's precisely this image that puts us on autopilot. All of us have images, and we cultivate images because we want to be respected for who we are and who we are not. But it's very important that the attributes of the self-image that we develop. I may see myself as a person of integrity, as somebody who's very honest, somebody who's very straightforward, and so on, and so on, and so on. Make sure that these images that you have, the ingredients of your self-image, are always collapsible. They're not absolutized. When you absolutize them, you limit yourself. You think you're capable of only these 3 or 4 or 5 qualities. Actually, human beings are pregnant with unlimited potential. And it's important to recognize that mentally and accept that and move along. The second last, having the courage to be vulnerable by acknowledging what we do not have. If we don't know something, this refers to the quality of humility that I spoke about. If we don't know something, you should always bow your head, or fold the palms of both your hands and say, I don't know, but I'll make sure that I find out and come back to you and revert to you. Um, you should not be afraid to expose your vulnerability, either in the private space or in the public space, because people actually, in the end, honest people are respected. You're respected for the fact that you're honest, that you're straightforward. If anybody tells you otherwise, don't believe him or her. And finally, disabling the roots of our core incompetencies. That's the final one, because by that I mean that all of us are a bundle of strengths and weaknesses, core strengths, core weaknesses. What is a core incompetence? Any pattern of recurring behavior that gives you negative energy is a core incompetence. So we must reflect on ourselves and see what are the core incompetencies that block our potential, block us from being who we are, block us from blossoming into those individuals. And once you're able to identify them, our next responsibility, of course, is to disable them. So I call it disabling the roots of our core incompetencies. And finally, Theodore Levitt, if I remember rightly, was one of the former editors of the Harvard Business Review and once wrote a very famous paper on creativity and innovation. Said, creativity is thinking up new things. Innovation is doing new things. So the two things are radically different. One is relatively easy to be creative, but enormously difficult to be innovative. So it's a good idea to be both. Thank you very much for your patience, your understanding,